both brains, I guess. It's about both brains. So what this is called in psychology, your question is how do I get back onto get off of my amygdala and get into my prefrontal cortex and be able to think clearly and be able to think morally and rationally. And in psychology, this is called emotional regulation. This is called regulating your nervous system. So nowadays, this is what experts are talking about. They found that this is actually the cause of chronic illness, is a dysregulated nervous system. Basically, your nervous system being constantly and chronically on high alert. Chronically fight or flight. Chronic survival mode. Chronic stress response. So the answer is you have to learn to regulate your nervous system. And regulating your nervous system, there are many ways that you can learn to do that, but one of them is by managing thoughts. One of them is by calming the body. How do we calm the body? Well, it's very interesting. Can I tell you something that I heard that blew my mind? So there's this phenomenon that they found. I think it's called, is it the drowning reflex or something like that? Basically, they found, listen to this, that if you splash cold water on your face, it immediately calms you down. I was like, I wonder where we do that. Is there like something we do 5 times a day, a little bit like that? I swear, it's just very interesting how science comes up with these things that, oh, we just found out. Well, you're a little late to the party. I mean, the other day I read this study. It took Harvard 20 years. They just came out with this study. Guess what they found out? They found out what Prophet ﷺ said more than 1400 years ago. Al-mar'u ala dini khalilin. That a person is on the way of their closest friend. In other words, they came out. I think my mic keeps going in and out. Yeah. So they came out with this study, 20-year study, and they found that people become like their closest companions. Oh. You know, it's like exactly, we already knew that. So, anyways, how do you calm yourself out of fight or flight? How do you start to regulate your nervous system? Well, one of the ways they found is actually putting cold water on your face. This is called wudu. This is called wudu. Really, I was like, wow. He's like, this guy, this doctor, he's like, you just put cold water on your face and you have an immediate, it's like it's so immediate. Who designed this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it immediately calms you down. This non-Muslim is saying this. And I think back to the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu. What does he tell us if you're angry? If you're standing, sit down.
Personally, he said,
if you're sitting, lay down. And
oh my
God. Right? So, subhanAllah, there are ways to calm the nervous system, but one of the things is managing thoughts. Managing the way we deal with fear, when it knocks on the door of our mind, and when we can get ourselves out of the amygdala, out of the panic, out of the panic response, then our prefrontal cortex can go back online. Yes, our mindset. We can think rationally, problem solve, and more moral. We can have moral reasoning, but we can't be
could you please share
otherwise.
the picture that I want to see?
Sorry, one thing like build a relationship with Allah in which you can put your trust in Allah. It helps a lot with fear and I found this in my own life. When I'm really worried about something, I'm really afraid. The more that I can turn to Allah and make dua about what I'm afraid of, and then truly feel as though Allah has heard me, then I can say to myself, Allah, I've already asked Allah. As long as there isn't an action that I still need to take, I'll do my best to take the action. I am a very action-oriented human. But putting your trust in Allah helps a lot with anxiety.
I went to Saudi for Umrah. I stayed with Ramadan.
MashaAllah, thank you so much.
I
So,
stayed in
I think we got an answer, right? The basics
his
once again,
brother
alhamdulillah.
house.
Splash your
Yeah,
face with
Ali-
cold water.
Oh.
The wudu style, the best.
Some viral
And then
in
create your
IG, Instagram.
relationship with Allah.
Somebody
And trust in
met
Allah.
Arwah's
It's really
father over there.
one of the only ways to calm down
Ketemu
sometimes.
ayah di
Put your trust in Allah and know that
Ayah sekarang
Allah,
di
you've
sini
asked
dia
Allah.
di Indonesia.
And I
Dia
also really
waktu
like when you were
I
mentioning
mean,
about
they stay here or
the
just come
rationales,
to
right?
just
It's
come
something
for
that
visit.
makes us
But
actually
they stay
humans. And I think
permanently
this is so true that
in
whenever we have this
Madinah.
kind of situation, that's where we can actually remind ourselves, wait a second, like, let me not be too emotional. And this morning we were talking about the women's stages in life. You know, like we have a lot of emotional stages. Why we're considered to be so vulnerable and emotional? It's obviously because we have so many
I met
things that Allah
family.
subhanahu wa ta'ala gifted us naturally that we have to consider, right? Like
16
daily,
Agustus.
monthly, and yearly when we're pregnant or when we have kids, etc. So I think that's where it's also a little more challenging for us as women. But inshallah, always remembering the fact that this happened for a reason. It's because we are humans. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala
making video.
made it for a reason. Once again, bring us back to our feelings, right?
Kalau Abuya suka makan ini.
So this question is quite interesting. I could relate so much. Thank you so much to whoever wrote it. How do you deal with a toxic person who always seems to have a negative mentality and tries to infuse this mentality and thought to others? Notes, this person is a close or inner family member that you cannot tolerate. Sorry. All right. So principle number one: try to avoid radioactive humans as much as you can. Try not to live next to a power plant. You know what I mean? Like, try not to live inside of a radioactive power plant as much as you can. So obviously, this is principle one. Always be mindful of your environment. Al-mar'u ala dini khalili. A person will be on the way of life, the way of thinking, the way of acting, the way of habits of their closest companions. So you do become affected very, very deeply by the people that you keep close to you. That's a fact. As I said, the Prophet ﷺ said it 1400 years ago, and Harvard just said it now. So the first ideal is don't live in or near a nuclear power plant. Okay? Clear? Now imagine that you have absolutely no power to live away from a nuclear power plant. Now, by the way, sometimes I think we think that we don't have, but we have a little bit more agency than we might think. Some of us think, no, but Islam says we have to stay close to the nuclear power plant. Well, no, that's not true, because Islam says لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. That no one is forced or held accountable or have an obligation or have a responsibility beyond what they can bear. Allah will not hold you accountable beyond what you can bear. Meaning, if something is harmful, you don't have to put yourself in that situation. So we have rules like Salat Rahim, staying close to family, Birr al-Walidain, kindness and goodness to parents. All of these are very important fundamental rules. But there are exceptions in cases of direct harm. Okay? Just like fasting. You know, you have to fast in Ramadan, but if fasting is going to kill you, you cannot fast. Understand? This is an Islamic principle. But imagine that you literally cannot get out of this nuclear power plant. Now, again, I repeat, sometimes you think you can't, but you actually can. Just wanna, I don't know what your situation is, it's vague, but just Just want to remind you of that. But imagine that you really can't. Like, maybe you're a child, maybe you're 5 years old, or 10 years old, okay, and you're in a toxic home. And literally you just don't have that agency. In that case now, where you do find yourself stuck in a nuclear power plant, now what do? Well, you better put on a lot of protective gear. Why? To try to block as much of the radiation as possible. How do you put on protective gear? Gosh, a lot of tahajjud, a lot of dua, a lot of begging Allah for help, a lot of dhikr, a lot of remembrance of Allah, a lot of istighfar. All of these are layers of protective gear. Understand? So don't live by a power plant. Don't live inside a nuclear power plant. But if you have absolutely no power to remove yourself from a nuclear power plant, wear protective gear. And there are a lot of layers of it. All of your remembrance of Allah is a layer of protective gear. That's why you know this collection, famous collection of du'as called Fortress of a Muslim, Hisn Muslim, literally because the remembrance of Allah is a fortress. It's your protective gear in the nuclear power plant. Until Allah saves you from the nuclear power plant. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove you from the toxic radioactive environment and to put you in a healthier environment, and keep asking Allah for that. I want to just tell you guys a funny story. So I can't remember what country I was in, and in the Q&A, someone asked me this question. I kid you not, someone asked me this question. And I answered as I answered now, and the person goes, I work in a nuclear power plant. I swear to God. I was like, what? Like, she asked a question not about a nuclear power plant, she asked a question about a toxic home environment. And she goes, I actually do work in a nuclear power plant. So anyways. It was a similar question. The question had to do with like an unhealthy home environment or like a toxic relationship or something. And after I had given this whole analogy, and it just, I said the analogy of a nuclear power plant. Imagine you have to be at a nuclear. She goes, I work in a nuclear power plant. That's what imagine, right? So we'll press the next question. I hope you got your answer. So it says it's a quick one, but it's a long one actually. So subhanAllah, the person just lost a friend group. So without any good reason, and it honestly broke her. People keep telling me that it's fine and I'll get over it. But it's been a while now, and every day just worse. I'm an overthinker, and sometimes my thoughts are my worst enemy, honestly. How do I deal with it? How do I deal with my overthinking in this situation? Well, so first of all, there's a few issues here. On the one hand, there's what has happened in your life. The life experience is that you lost this group of friends. And then it's really affecting you, and then your thoughts are kind of pretty negative. So there's the external thing that happened, and then there's what's going on in your mind. All right, so there's two issues here. To be honest, I write a lot about this in Reclaim Your Heart. How many people read Reclaim Your Heart? Okay, so the rest of you, I forgive you. Forgiveness is a good thing, but you can rectify your ways today. We have Reclaim Your Heart available. Reclaim Your Heart is a book that I wrote after many, many years of blood, sweat, and tears. And what the book is about is exactly the situation this question is asking. It's about the attachments to people, and how sometimes our attachments to people are deeply unhealthy, and how we have to learn to have healthy attachments to people. And to be honest, I relate to this question because I went through the same thing when I was young. And that's how I wrote Reclaim Your Heart. Is that I also got very attached to people. And if I were to get, in any kind of fallout with a friend, it was like it was the end of the world for me. I was so attached to my friends that if something happened in my, friendships, I would feel as if the world was over. I was just like very sensitive. And then as I grew through my life, I started to realize that the type of attachments I had were not healthy. So what I did is I started to have these like epiphanies, these realizations, and I wrote about them. Reclaim Your Heart is a collection of work over 10 years. So I was going through a lot of these lessons over this 10-year period. But my advice to you is, it might be that you are having these types of attachments to your friends, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to attach to Him. So what you're going through right now is a temporary process. My advice to you is turn to Allah and recognize that maybe your attachment wasn't healthy, or maybe the friendships weren't healthy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to bring you back to a healthy type of attachment, and most of all, attach you to Him more and deeper. So use this as a redirection by Allah. A redirection. You know, you were going in the wrong way, you know, and maybe you were just having this very unhealthy attachment to your friends, and Allah wants to redirect you. I can tell you how many times it happened in my life, so I'm speaking from experience. And for the love of God, reclaim your heart. The other thing I wanted to say is that many of us don't realize that our attachments to dunya are actually attachments to people. And this was probably the biggest epiphany for me in my own life, and kind of the core of Reclaim Your Heart, is that I always thought, oh, you know, attachment to dunya was materialism. You know, it's like being attached to fancy cars or money or big houses, and I wasn't really bothered by that stuff. But my unhealthy attachments to dunya were unhealthy attachments to people. And I didn't realize that that was part of hope in dunya. So anyway, this was like mind-blowing situation for me in my life, and that became sort of the core message of Reclaim Your Heart. Thank you so much, Mustafa. Hopefully this answers your question. We would like to, so this question is actually was already answered during the morning session, but I think it would be really beneficial for everybody to hear. It's about quite a serious situation here. I just lost 3 close people in my life for the past 3 years. My husband, and then my mom, and this year my dad. My husband suffered from COVID. I'm thinking he was not good enough for me, so Allah took him away from me. Or, she's wondering whether, or me to attach to him, and that's why Allah took him away. Or is it just about something else? And yeah, basically she still thinks about it, whether like what would be the reason why Allah took something away from the person. That's definitely something that Jim talked about today. Okay. I don't know how to verbalize this in the best way, but it seems as though I have to state the obvious here because we forget. This life is temporary. This person seems like they want to become a detective as to why Allah took someone away. We're all going away. We're all going away. We just have different dates for our flights. You know that, right? And I say this as a reminder to myself and to you, but we get into this state where we think that this is permanent. It's like somewhere in the back of our mind, we know that this life isn't permanent, but we don't actually believe that this life is not permanent. And it's like we get so shocked. What? Someone died? What? Someone sick? What? I didn't get what I wanted? This life is temporary. And unfortunately, we do start to deal with dunya as if it's our permanent home. And we are taken by surprise when someone passes away or someone is taken from us, or we are told that we're going to die, you know, Ali, rahimahullah, this is one thing he said. When he was asked about what is his greatest regret, he said that the greatest regret was that Allah already told him that he was going to die. But it took a doctor in a white coat for him to believe. And you know, I read this before, which is, there was a journalist who asks this woman who was dying, how does it feel to have a terminal illness? And you know what she said? She replied, she says, no, she said, the journalist said, how does it feel to know that you have a terminal illness? And you know what the woman said to the journalist who asked the question? How does it feel to pretend that you don't have a terminal illness? Don't we all have a terminal illness? Aren't we all going to die? SubhanAllah, I said, what? What do you mean? But we all are going to die. So this shock that we have that somebody died is a sign that we're not really understanding that this life is temporary. We're all just passing through this life temporarily. And I just thought it was so profound what Ali rahimahullah said. He's like, Allah already told me that I had a terminal illness. But I didn't believe it when Allah said it. Basically. But it took a doctor with a white coat so that I could believe that I had a terminal illness. SubhanAllah. But you know what? Human beings, we were not made for this life, and so our fitrah is we desire Jannah. And Jannah doesn't end. And Jannah is permanent. And Jannah is perfect. So what happens is that we get confused. You know what I mean? It's like you have this desire in you for something that is home. What does home look like? Home is perfect and home is permanent. So we're like, oh, we want to make this life home. Because we have this deep, deep fitrah that we desire home. But this isn't our home. This isn't our home. And it's a reminder to us, and it's something we have to make the most of your time, but it's just a rest stop. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ said. He said, Mali with dunya, what do I have to do with this life? I am like a traveler who stops in the shade of a tree for a while and then continues on the journey. We are just stopping in the shade of a tree. We're all continuing this journey, but we all have different arrival times and departure times. That's it. But everybody is going to the same place. And that is the grave. And after that, stand in front of Allah. And after that, we go to the house that we spent our lives building here. Or that we spent our lives burning down. May Allah protect us. So right now, the only thing we're doing is we are building our permanent home. Some people, unfortunately, are burning it down. But that's where we end up. So invest, basically, right? I know we have a lot of investors maybe in the room. Invest, because that's going to be your permanent home. And we're all going there. It's not a shock that someone went there. We're all going there. Just have different departure times and different arrival times. Sorry, it's true.
MashaAllah, I think this definitely answers the question. But also just to really mention, because I think the second part of your, when you were answering this question early in the morning session, was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better what is good for us. Right? And so even the Islam mentioned that, right?
So I mean, I talked about hardships. I talked about how we respond to hardships. But what I would say to you, sister, my advice to you in healing, and I spoke a lot about the fact that this life is temporary, only because your question was asking almost why did it happen, so I focused on that. But if your question is different, if your question is how can I heal, then that's a whole different discussion. And that is actually what I wrote about in Healing the Exodus. How do I heal is a different question than why were they taken. So I was answering your actual question, which was why were they taken? And my answer is we're all going to be taken. How to heal? That's another discussion. And I honestly read Healing That. It's a big discussion. I've spent the last 2.5 months teaching this content. I can't really answer it just in a 2-minute answer. But what I will say is this. You can't heal unless you turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can't truly heal unless you build a deep, very strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Turn to Allah in tahajjud, and this is like an ICU, an intensive care unit. It heals you miraculously. Turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, cry to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shift your deepest attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He will get you through this. Allah is the shelter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease your pain. And I want to say something to you. Do not ever think so negatively about yourself that you were not good enough and that's why it was taken away from you. Absolutely wrong. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests those He loves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away many family members from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it was not because he was not good enough. So please do not think so negatively about yourself and think positive about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah loves you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of you, but you have to turn back to Allah and find shelter in the nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not beat yourself up and think that you were not worthy and that's why it was taken away. Because remember that the prophets, they all had close family members taken away. Allah tests those He loves. He loves. Go back to Allah, seek nearness to Allah, and that will be your shelter in these storms that are hitting you right now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal your pain. And may Allah reunite you with those who have passed. I say this to everyone who has lost loved ones. Your loved one was a soul, and the soul never dies. Your loved one is a soul, and the soul never dies. The soul is just in another realm, waiting for you to join, inshallah. Only the body dies. Only the shell dies. The soul doesn't die.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. This is definitely a full, complete answer. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Ustaza. Do you have any general advice for teenage girls? How to cope with hardships, school, emotions, relationships? Especially with boys, it says, but with an Islamic perspective.
Okay, this is a seminar topic.
Let's make it short.
Okay, advice to girls. All right, I guess my best advice, if I had to give, my best advice to girls is fill yourself and your self-worth in your relationship with Allah. Not in your relationship with boys, not in your relationship with your friends, not in how you look, not in how many followers you have, or likes you have, or approval from people. But find your self-worth in Allah. Find your self-worth in your Islamic identity. Find your self-worth in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it's very, very difficult being a young female right now. It's very difficult being a young male too. There's so much confusion, even what is a female? We can't even answer that question. What is a woman? Do you guys know there's like this documentary? And it's called What is a Woman? And it's about this guy who goes around asking experts, doctors, professors, what is a woman? They can't answer the question. They can't answer the question. Their answer is whoever identifies as being a woman. Okay, but what are they identifying as? What is a woman? And they can't answer the question. So it is confusing times. We live in crazy times. So my advice to you is hold on to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hold on to the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make sure that your self-worth is based on your relationship with Allah, not on how you look, how many followers, how many likes, approval of others, relationship with friends, boys, etc. None of that should define your self-worth. And please do your best to follow the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the more that you follow the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the safer you will be. Remember, anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden, whether that is dating, or haram relationships, or drinking, or drugs, or anything that Allah has forbidden, it is by definition poison. It means it's poison. So the more that you involve yourself in something forbidden, the more you are drinking the poison. So protect yourself from the poison as much as you can and base your self-worth in Allah, not in the people. Not in the approval of people, not how you look, not in how many people like you, not in how many people approve of you or compliment you. Please don't make your self-worth based on any of that.
Mashallah, thank you so much. This is actually about